The galaxy knew one rule: never enter Omega-12. It was a cursed system, a place where entire fleets vanished. No signals ever escaped. No survivors ever returned. Every species had lost ships, soldiers, and knowledge in that dark region of space. The Exilari Empire, the rulers of the known galaxy, had declared Omega-12 a forbidden zone. No one was allowed to go there. They warned every race: enter, and you will never return. But then, a human ship disappeared inside Omega-12. The last transmission. Captain Elias Carter stood inside the Earth Defense Command Center, his jaw tight as he watched the final transmission from the lost ship, the U.S. Valkyrie. The screen flickered with static. A crew member's face appeared, drenched in sweat, eyes filled with terror. "This is Valkyrie, requesting immediate evac. Something is here. Something." A loud screech cut through the transmission. The crew member screamed, his voice suddenly cut off. Then silence. Then a whisper: "You should not have come." The screen went black. The room was silent. Every officer, every scientist, and every soldier in the command center felt a chill down their spine. Admiral Tessa Monroe turned to Captain Carter. "Omega-12 took another ship, just like all the others." Elias clenched his fists. "Then we go in and bring them back." A general scoffed. "You're talking about a system where entire armadas have disappeared. Even the Exilari refuse to go there. What makes you think humans will survive?" Elias's voice was calm, steady. "Because we're not like the others." The suicide mission. The mission was put together in less than a week. The best soldiers, engineers, and scientists were chosen for the task. They would fly into Omega-12 on a modified stealth ship, the U.S. Revenant, equipped with the most advanced tech humanity had. The team included Captain Elias Carter, the mission leader, a man who had never left a soldier behind; Dr. Anna Reyes, a top scientist, an expert in unknown energy fields; Sergeant Mark Vance, a brutal fighter, ready for any threat; Lieutenant Sarah Quinn, a pilot with nerves of steel; Corporal James Vega, a communications expert, tasked with sending signals back to Earth. Before boarding the ship, Elias met Admiral Monroe one last time. "You don't have to do this," she said. Elias shook his head. "If we don't go, no one else will." Monroe sighed. "Just remember, no one comes back from Omega-12." Elias smiled slightly. "Then we'll be the first." Entering the void. The U.S. Revenant launched at 0 dark 30, cutting through space at faster than light speed. In just a few hours, the system Omega-12 appeared on their scanners. As soon as they got close, all instruments started failing. The ship's sensors flickered. The navigation system glitched. A strange whispering sound filled their radios. Dr. Rice stared at her screen. "This isn't normal. It's like the system itself is alive." Sarah gripped the controls, losing guidance, switching to manual piloting. Elias looked at the main view screen. Ahead of them, Omega-12 loomed like a dark wound in space. Planets floated in silence, surrounded by wreckage. Dozens, no, hundreds, of destroyed ships drifted through the void. Some were old, their designs unknown. Others belonged to the Exilari, the Vordax, even human vessels long thought missing. Sergeant Vance narrowed his eyes. "It's a graveyard." Then something moved. A dark shape, too fast to see clearly. It flickered between the wreckage, like a shadow slipping through the void. Vega's hands shook over his controls. Tell me someone else saw that." No one answered, because at that moment, every light on the ship died. The crash. The Revenant shook violently, alarms blaring. "We're in a gravity well," Sarah shouted. "Something is pulling us down, hard." Elias grabbed the controls. "Brace for impact." The ship plunged toward a planet, its hull burning as it crashed through the atmosphere. The impact was brutal. Metal screeched, panels exploded, and everyone was thrown against their seats. Then, darkness. When Elias opened his eyes, he was lying against a broken console. Sparks flickered above him. His head throbbed. His crew groaned, slowly regaining consciousness. Dr. Reyes checked her readings. "We're alive." "Barely." Vance looked around. "Where the hell are we?" Outside the cracked window, the landscape was lifeless. Black mountains stretched across the horizon, and the sky was filled with swirling red clouds. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the wreckage. Everywhere they looked, the remains of ships lay scattered, thousands of years' worth of destruction. And then, in the distance, something moved. A tall, thin figure, barely visible through the dust. Not human, not Silari. Something else. Sarah whispered, "We're not alone." The whispering begins. The crew armed themselves, stepping cautiously onto the dead planet. The wind howled around them, carrying with it voices, not words, not languages, whispers. They seemed to come from every direction, soft and chilling. Vega's face was pale. "Tell me I'm just hearing things." Dr. Reyes held up her scanner. "No, it's real." She hesitated. "But there's no source." Vance gripped his rifle. "Yeah. Well, something's out there." Elias signaled for them to move forward. "Stay close. We find the Valkyrie's crew. Then we get the hell out." As they walked deeper into the wreckage, the whispers grew louder. Then the ground shook. Something was waking up. Final words. Far above, in the safety of their empire, the Xilari High Council watched from their golden palace. Their advisors spoke in hushed voices, watching the human mission unfold on hidden surveillance systems. "They have entered Omega-12, one of them said. "They will die," another replied. The Supreme Chancellor, a being older than most civilizations, simply watched in silence. Then he muttered something that no one expected. Perhaps not. Because for the first time in history, humans had entered Omega-12. And Omega-12 had started whispering back. The whispers never stopped. As the human team moved through the wreckage-strewn wasteland, the eerie voices grew louder. They seemed to shift and change, sometimes echoing words spoken by the crew themselves. "Turn back. You don't belong here. You will die like the others." Sergeant Vance clenched his jaw, gripping his rifle. "I don't like this, Captain." Elias Carter scanned the horizon. The planet was dead, but something was watching them. He could feel it. "We keep moving," he said. The Valkyrie's crew could still be alive. Dr. Reyes checked her scanner. "There's a structure nearby. Metallic, underground. It's old, but intact." Elias nodded. "Then that's where we're going." The team moved quickly, weapons ready. Above them, dark shapes flickered between the storm clouds. Watching. Waiting. Omega-12 wasn't just a graveyard. It was a hunting ground. The first attack. They reached the entrance of the underground structure. An ancient bunker, its doors half buried in the dust. Vega worked on the controls. "It's locked. But I think I can." A deep howl cut through the air. Then they came. Out of the wreckage, shadows moved. Not quite alive, not quite machines. Tall, thin creatures with metallic limbs and glowing eyes. Their bodies were stitched together with alien technology, remnants of past victims fused into their forms. They weren't just hunters. They were the remains of those who had come before. Vega's hands shook. "Are those people?" One creature snapped its head toward him. Its mouth opened, and from within, a garbled human voice echoed. "Help. Me." Then it lunged. Fighting back. The humans opened fire. Bullets tore into the creatures, but they didn't stop. Dr. Reyes screamed as one almost grabbed her, but Vance slammed into it, driving his combat knife through its eye. The creature shrieked and collapsed. "These things can die," Vance shouted. Elias emptied a full clip into another creature, blowing its head apart, But more were coming, crawling out from the wreckage like insects. "We need to get inside now," Elias roared. Vega hacked the bunker's controls, fingers moving faster than ever. Almost there. Almost. The door hissed open. "Go." The team rushed inside, slamming the door shut behind them. For a moment, there was silence. Then, bang. The creatures were pounding on the door. But they couldn't get in. Not yet. Secrets in the dark. The team took a moment to breathe. The bunker was pitch black, the air thick with dust. The only sound was their own rapid breathing. Dr. Rice activated a flashlight. "What is this place?" Elias shone his own light on the walls. They were covered in markings. Not alien, not Silari. Human. Vega's eyes widened. "No way. These are old Earth symbols. This place was built by humans." But how? Humanity had never been to Omega-12 before. Or so they thought. Then, from deep inside the bunker, they heard a noise. Not a whisper. Not a machine. A human voice. Weak. Struggling. "Help. Please." Someone was alive. Elias raised his weapon. "Move out." They went deeper, following the voice through the dark corridors. The walls were lined with skeletons, not just human, but alien. Some wore Silari armor. Others were species the team didn't even recognize. Whatever had killed them, it had been here for a long time. Finally, they reached a metal door. The voice was coming from inside. Vega hesitated. What if it's a trap? Elias didn't wait. He pushed the door open. Inside, they found a man. A human man. Alive. The survivor. The man was weak, half-starved, his uniform torn and covered in blood. His hair was white, but his face looked young. Dr. Reyes scanned him. "This can't be right." Vega swallowed. What's wrong?" She hesitated. "According to my readings, this man is over 200 years old." The man coughed, trying to sit up. His voice was hoarse. You shouldn't have come here." Elias crouched beside him. "Who are you?" The man's eyes, filled with pain and knowledge, met his. "I was the last one," he whispered. "The last to survive Omega-12. Outside the bunker, the whispers grew louder. Something was coming. The bunker was silent except for the labored breathing of the man before them. A human. The survivor. His uniform was torn, his body weak, but his eyes held something that made the team uneasy. He had seen things that no one should see. Dr. Reyes checked her scanner again. "This doesn't make sense. Your DNA shows you're human, but your cells have aged differently. My readings say you're over 200 years old." The man gave a weak laugh. "I believe it." Elias crouched next to him. "Who are you?" The survivor took a slow, painful breath. "My name is Commander David Kane," he said. "I was on a mission. A long time ago." His face darkened. "We came to Omega-12, and we never left." Outside the bunker, the whispers grew louder. Something was waiting. The truth about Omega-12. Kane's hands trembled as he tried to sit up. "You don't understand what this place is." Elias narrowed his eyes. "Then explain." Kane exhaled sharply. "Omega-12 isn't just a system. It's a trap, a prison. Every ship that enters is caught in a loop, a never-ending hunt." Vance tightened his grip on his rifle. "Hunted by what?" Kane's voice was almost a whisper. "They were once like us, explorers, warriors. But Omega-12 changes you. It twists you. It keeps you alive, but not human." He looked at them, his eyes filled with fear. "They're still here." A deep thud echoed from outside the bunker. Everyone froze. The whispers stopped. Something was at the door. The nightmare begins. Vega checked the security monitors. His hands shook. We have a problem." The team gathered around the screen. Outside the bunker, figures stood in the storm, dozens of them. Twisted bodies, metallic limbs, glowing eyes. The lost. They weren't just random creatures. They were former soldiers, pilots, explorers. Some wore auxiliary armor. Others had human patches on their ruined uniforms. One still had an old Earth flag stitched onto his chest. Kane's voice was hollow. "Those were my men." A terrible howl echoed through the storm. The creatures charge. Nowhere left to run. "Move!" Elias shouted. The team rushed to reinforce the door. Vance and Sarah flipped over a metal table, using it as a barricade. Vega frantically searched for another exit. Bang! Bang! The creatures slammed against the bunker doors. Metal bent. The whispers started again, slithering into their ears. "Let us in. Join us. You don't have to die alone." Sarah gritted her teeth. "I swear to God, if those things talk again, I'm gonna lose my—" Then, silence. Vance's breathing was heavy. Did they stop? Then the power cut out. The room was thrown into darkness. A faint mechanical voice echoed through the walls. "System override complete. Security compromised." The doors unlocked. Then they swung open, and the creatures rushed in. A desperate escape. Gunfire roared through the bunker. Elias fired into the horde, dropping 3 creatures with precise headshots. Vance tackled another, driving his combat knife into its throat. Sarah screamed as one grabbed her, but Vega blasted it away with his shotgun. Kane tried to stand, his body weak. "There's another way out," he gasped. "The tunnels. Below us." Rise ran to a control panel, frantically scanning. There, a hatch leads into underground tunnels. Elias shot another creature and grabbed Kane. "Go. Now." Sarah and Vega ripped open the floor hatch. One by one, they dropped down into darkness. The labyrinth below. The tunnels were cold, silent. The whispers above faded. "For now," Kane coughed, struggling to breathe. "They won't stop hunting you. Not now. You've been marked." Elias gritted his teeth. "Then we need to end this." Dr. Ray scanned the tunnel walls. These structures, they're not just bunkers. They go deep. Someone built this place for a reason. Vega looked at Kane. "You said Omega-12 is a trap. But a trap for who?" Kane's face was grim. "For something older than the auxiliary." Elias exhaled slowly. Then, ahead in the tunnel, a door slid open. Inside, something was waiting. Something that had been here since the beginning. And it was awake. The tunnels were cold and silent, stretching endlessly into the darkness. The dim glow of the team's flashlights barely cut through the thick dust in the air. Every step echoed, making it feel like something unseen was walking alongside them. Commander David Kane, the last survivor of the previous mission, limped beside Elias Carter, his breathing uneven. "You don't understand," he whispered. "We were never meant to leave. Omega-12 doesn't let anyone go." Elias tightened his grip on his rifle. He had seen many things in his years of service, but something about Kane's words sent a chill through him. If Omega-12 didn't let anyone go, then how had Kane survived for 2 centuries? Dr. Rice ran her hand over the walls of the tunnel, her scanner beeping softly. "These aren't just old ruins. The material isn't auxiliary, and it's not human either." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "It's older." Vega glanced back at the sealed hatch they had escaped through. The sounds of the creatures above had faded, but that didn't mean they had given up. "We need to keep moving," he muttered. "They're not going to stop hunting us." Elias nodded. They had no choice. Whatever secrets lay ahead were still better than what was waiting behind them. The Chamber of Echoes. The tunnel led them to an enormous chamber, the ceiling disappearing into shadows above. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly as the team stepped inside. At the center of the room stood a massive structure, a towering black monolith, humming with an eerie energy. Kane inhaled sharply. It's still active. Elias turned to him. What is? Kane didn't answer. He simply stared at the monolith, his expression filled with something between awe and horror. This is where it all started, he murmured. Vance moved closer to the monolith, shining his flashlight on its surface. It looks ancient, but there's no dust on it. He reached out hesitantly, but Kane grabbed his wrist. Don't, Kane warned, his voice sharp. It's a prison. The team exchanged uneasy glances. A prison? Rise asked. For what? Before Kane could answer, the chamber shook. A deep guttural roar filled the air, vibrating through their bones. It came from somewhere beyond the monolith. Something massive was waking up. Vega took a step back, his pulse racing. Tell me that was just the wind. Kane's face was pale. No, it's them. The walls trembled again, and then the whispers returned. But this time, they didn't come from above. They came from within the monolith itself. The horror within. The whispering voices grew louder, overlapping, speaking in 1,000 different languages. Some were familiar, others completely alien. They spoke words of pain, of hunger, of endless torment. Then, in perfect human English, a voice cut through the noise. You are not supposed to be here. Elias raised his rifle, scanning the chamber. Show yourself. The monolith shuddered. A thin crack formed along its surface, glowing with an eerie blue light. The room grew colder. Then, a figure stepped out. At first, it looked human. Tall, draped in tattered armor, its face hidden behind a helmet that seemed fused to its skull. But as it moved, its body shifted, its limbs stretching unnaturally before snapping back into place. Its glowing eyes locked onto them, filled with something beyond hatred. Kane's breath caught. It's one of them. The creature tilted its head. Not one, it said, its voice a hollow echo. We are many. Then the chamber erupted into chaos. No escape. The monolith split open, releasing a wave of dark energy that slammed into the team, sending them tumbling back. The whispers turned into screams, and from the shadows, more figures began to emerge. Not just one. Not just 10. Hundreds. They had been trapped inside, for centuries, for millennia. And now, they were free. Elias fired his rifle, but the bullets barely slowed them down. Move, he shouted. Vega and Vance pulled Kane to his feet, while Reyes scrambled to find another exit. There's a passage ahead, she yelled. The team ran. Behind them, the figures howled, their voices merging into an unnatural wail. The chamber shook violently as the monolith cracked further, releasing more of the creatures from their prison. As Elias sprinted, Kane's words echoed in his mind. Omega-12 doesn't let anyone go. And now, neither would they. The tunnel shook as the creatures howled behind them. The team ran, their footsteps pounding against the cold metal floor. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching and twisting in unnatural ways. The air was thick, heavy with whispers that slithered into their minds. You don't belong here. You set us free. We were waiting. Elias Carter clenched his jaw, forcing himself to ignore the voices. He gripped his rifle tighter as they turned a corner, the dim tunnel stretching endlessly ahead. Vega, breathing hard, checked the map on his wrist display. This tunnel leads deeper underground, but I don't know where it ends. We don't have a choice, Vance muttered, glancing over his shoulder. The creatures were still behind them, their glowing eyes flickering in the dark. We keep running, or we die. Kane, still weak, stumbled as he ran. Elias grabbed his arm, keeping him steady. You knew this would happen, Elias said. You knew what was inside that monolith. Kane's face was pale, his expression grim. I knew, but I also knew the truth had to be revealed. Elias didn't like the sound of that. The Hall of Names. The tunnel ended in a massive door, covered in strange markings. The whispers grew louder, pressing against their skulls. Rice studied the door, her scanner flickering. It's locked, but it's not a normal lock. Vega stepped forward, running his fingers over the symbols. These are names, he whispered. The team fell silent. Thousands of names. Human names, Silari names, names of species they didn't even recognize, all carved into the metal like a grave marker. This place, Kane exhaled. It's a list of the ones who never escaped. A chill ran through Elias. Before anyone could react, the whispers changed. No longer distant voices, no longer warnings. Now they called their names. Elias Carter, Vega, Dr. Reyes. You are already part of us. The door unlocked, and it swung open. The mind of Omega-12. Beyond the door was a vast chamber, filled with massive floating machines pulsing with dark energy. At the center, a towering structure hummed, its core shifting like liquid metal. Kane's breathing became ragged. This is the heart of Omega-12. Reyes' scanner flickered wildly. This isn't just a station. It's alive. Elias stepped forward cautiously. What does that mean? Kane swallowed hard. Omega-12 isn't just a battlefield. It's a weapon. A trap designed to capture something far worse than the Xilari. His voice trembled, and we just set it loose. A deep rumble shook the chamber. The structure in the center shifted. Then it spoke. You opened the door. The air grew ice cold. Now you will take their place. The floating machines came to life, their cores flickering with ghostly blue flames. The chamber itself started closing, sealing the exit behind them. Elias' heart pounded. Move. No more running. The machines attacked, firing crackling beams of energy that shattered the walls around them. The team dove for cover, bullets flying as they fought back. But the enemy wasn't just the machines. The shadows moved. The creatures from the monolith were here. They swarmed through the walls, their shifting forms flickering in and out of sight. Vega shot one in the head, but it didn't fall. It melted into the floor, reappearing behind him. Elias grabbed a grenade and threw it. Boom! The explosion tore through several of them, but more kept coming. Kane struggled to his feet. There's only one way to stop this. Elias turned to him. How? Kane's eyes darkened. We have to destroy Omega-12. The entire station. The impossible choice. Vega ducked behind cover. Are you insane? This place is massive. There's no way we can. There is a way, Kane interrupted. He pointed at the towering core in the center of the room. That's the control node. If we overload it, the entire system collapses. Rice checked her scanner. But if we do that, we won't have time to escape. Elias finished. The chamber trembled violently. The creatures grew closer, the machines growing more aggressive. There was no way out. Vega's jaw clenched. Then we take them with us. Elias nodded. We end this. They had come here expecting a rescue mission. Instead, they had uncovered something ancient, something unstoppable. But if Omega-12 had taken thousands before them, it wouldn't take anyone else. Elias reloaded his rifle. This is where it ends. And they charge. The chamber shook as the team fought their way toward the core. Every step forward was a battle against the nightmare creatures that slithered from the shadows, their twisted forms flickering in and out of existence. Elias Carter fired his rifle in controlled bursts, dropping one creature after another. But no matter how many fell, more kept coming. The air was thick with whispers, pressing against their skulls, trying to worm their way into their thoughts. Join us. There is no escape. You are already dead. Vega crushed the barrel of his shotgun against the head of a creature and fired. It collapsed into black mist, only for another to rise in its place. Damn it, we can't hold them off forever. Kane, barely able to stand, pointed at the massive core in the center of the chamber. We don't need to fight forever, just long enough to bring this place down. Dr. Rice was already at the control console, her fingers moving across the ancient interface. The core is connected to every part of the station. She called out, "If we overload it, the energy will destabilize. But it's going to take time." Elias clenched his jaw. "Then we buy you time." The creatures screamed in rage. They knew what the humans were trying to do, and they would not let it happen. The last stand. Vance and Vega reinforced their position, flipping over a fallen piece of machinery for cover. "We hold this line," Vance growled, checking his ammo. "No matter what comes." Elias crouched beside them, scanning the advancing horde. He could see them more clearly now. Some still wore pieces of old uniforms, badges from forgotten wars. Some were human, men and women who had once fought and lost. Now, they were part of Omega-12. Elias' stomach twisted, but he didn't let himself hesitate. They weren't alive anymore. Whatever they had been, Omega-12 had twisted them into something else. And now, they had to be put down. The first wave came like a storm. The team opened fire, their weapons roaring in defiance. One by one, the creatures fell. But the shadows kept moving, shifting, learning. Vega pumped his shotgun and fired again, blowing apart a figure that had once been an auxiliary soldier. "They're adapting," he warned. "They're getting faster." Dr. Rice worked frantically. Almost there. Just a few more minutes. But a new sound filled the chamber, a deep mechanical hum. Elias' blood ran cold. What now? Then he saw it. The monolith was changing. The true horror of Omega-12. The massive structure that had once imprisoned the creatures was awakening. The cracks along its surface spread like veins of light, pulsing with raw energy. Then it moved. A deep, ancient voice rippled through the room. "You cannot destroy what you do not understand." Elias' hands tightened on his weapon. "Watch me." The monolith shifted, its massive form splitting apart like a puzzle rearranging itself. And from its center, something stepped forward. Not one of the creatures. Not a soldier. Something else. It was tall, almost twice the size of a human, its body a fusion of organic matter and shifting metal. Its face was smooth, featureless, except for two burning white eyes. The whispers in the room grew silent. It wasn't like the others. It was their master. The entity gazed at the humans, as if studying them. Then, in a voice that was not a whisper, but a command, it spoke. "Kneel." Humanity's answer. Elias exhaled slowly. He could feel the weight of the entity's presence pressing down on his mind, forcing him to obey. But he didn't kneel. Instead, he raised his rifle. "I don't think so." And he pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the entity's chest. It staggered slightly, but didn't fall. Instead, it tilted its head, almost curious. Then it moved, faster than anything Elias had ever seen. In the blink of an eye, it was in front of him. A powerful force slammed into his chest, sending him flying across the room. He crashed into a console, gasping as pain shot through his ribs. "Elias!" Rice shouted. Vega and Vance opened fire, unloading everything they had into the entity. But the bullets slowed as they got close, melting into harmless sparks before they could reach their target. The entity raised a hand. The air cracked. A pulse of pure energy erupted from its palm, blasting Vega off his feet and slamming Vance into the wall. The humans were nothing to it. They were insects. But Kane, weak, barely standing, stepped forward. And the entity stopped. It stared at him, its burning eyes narrowing. "You," it said, its voice filled with recognition. Kane smiled grimly. "Yeah, you remember me, don't you?" The entity didn't answer, but something in its posture shifted. Elias groaned, forcing himself up. "What the hell is going on?" Kane glanced back at him. "I wasn't just trapped here for 200 years. His voice was quiet, but firm. "I was studying it." The monolith trembled. The creatures in the shadows grew restless. "They call themselves gods," Kane said, "but they aren't. They're prisoners." Omega-12 was never their trap. He turned back to the entity. "It was built to contain you." The entity's eyes flashed with fury, and Omega-12 began to collapse. The final countdown. Dr. Reyes gasped. "The core, it's overloading. It's working." Elias' heart pounded. "Then we need to go." The chamber was shaking violently now, cracks forming along the walls. The monolith was breaking apart, its energy spiraling out of control. The entity let out an inhuman roar, the very air around it warping and twisting. Elias grabbed Kane. "Come on, we're leaving." Kane didn't move. Instead, he looked at Elias, a sad smile on his face. "Not me." Elias' stomach twisted. "No, no way. We all leave, or no one does." Kane shook his head. "If I go, it follows. Someone has to hold it here." Elias clenched his jaw. "We'll find another way." But Kane was already moving. He turned toward the entity. "You wanted me," Kane whispered. "Then take me." The entity lunged, and Kane activated the failsafe. The core exploded. Blinding white light swallowed the room. Elias, Vega, Vance, and Reyes barely had time to dive for cover. Then, everything disappeared. Silence. For a long moment, there was nothing. No screams. No whispers. No gunfire. Just blinding white light swallowing everything. A deep, powerful shockwave ripped through Omega-12, tearing through its ancient structure. Metal twisted, corridors collapsed, and the very fabric of the station began to break apart. Elias Carter gasped as he came back to his senses, his ears ringing. He was alive, but barely. He pushed himself up, coughing as thick smoke filled the air. Sparks rained from shattered control panels. The room where they had fought the entity was gone, replaced by a massive hole leading into a swirling void of energy. "Vega, Vance, Reyes," Elias called out, his voice hoarse. A groan came from nearby. "Still here," Vega muttered, dragging himself up from the rubble. His face was bloodied, but he was breathing. Dr. Reyes coughed, waving smoke away from her face. "I'm okay, I think." Vance pushed a piece of fallen debris off his leg. "Not dead yet." Elias let out a breath of relief. They were still alive, but not all of them. His stomach twisted as he turned toward the center of the destruction. Kane was gone, and so was the entity. The collapse begins. Reyes checked her wrist display. Her eyes widened. "We have a problem. A big one." Elias didn't like the sound of that. "Tell me." "The core is completely destabilized," she said, showing them the readings. "The station is breaking apart, and we're still inside." Vega cursed. "How long do we have?" "Minutes," Reyes answered. "If we don't get to the shuttle bay now, we go down with Omega-12. Elias didn't need to hear anything else. "Then we move." "Go." The team ran. The corridors were falling apart around them. Fires raged, metal beams collapsed, and gravity itself began to glitch, sending debris floating in strange directions. The voices that had once whispered in their minds were gone. The creatures were gone. All that remained was the dying station. And if they didn't escape soon, they'd die with it. The final stretch. The team reached the main hangar, or what was left of it. Half of the bay had collapsed into open space. The docking platform was barely holding together, and the escape shuttle was hanging by a thread, its rear thrusters sparking. "That's our ride," Vance shouted. But as they ran forward, the floor cracked beneath them. Elias barely had time to react before the metal gave way. He and Vega plunged downward, hanging between life and death. Elias' hand shot out, grabbing a broken ledge. Below him, nothing but open space. Vega wasn't as lucky. He was dangling from one arm, struggling to hold onto a loose cable. "Not good," he gritted out. Elias reached for him. Hold on. Vega gave him a flat look. No, I was planning to let go. Smartus. Above them, Reyes and Vance leaned over the ledge. We need to move. The station won't hold much longer, Reyes warned. The platform shook violently. The shuttle's engines flickered. Elias grabbed Vega's wrist just as the cable gave out. With a groan of effort, he hauled him up. Vega flopped onto solid ground, breathing hard. I owe you one. Damn right you do. No time to celebrate. They sprinted toward the shuttle. The final escape. Vance was already at the cockpit, flipping switches. Engines are barely holding together, but we can make it. Elias and Vega strapped in. Reyes ran diagnostics. Hull integrity is failing. This thing's falling apart as we speak. Elias looked out the viewport. Omega-12 was collapsing. The ancient station, the nightmare that had claimed thousands of lives, was finally coming to an end. And so was everything inside it. Elias' jaw tightened, including Kane. Vega seemed to read his mind. He shook his head. There was no saving him. Elias clenched his fists. He knew that. Kane had made his choice. He had sacrificed himself so they could escape. But it didn't make it any easier. Let's go, Elias muttered. Vance didn't hesitate. He punched the thrusters. The shuttle roared to life, engines sputtering as it launched forward. Behind them, Omega-12 finally collapsed. The dying station imploded, folding in on itself in a storm of energy. The entity, the creatures, the whispers, all of it was erased. A prison that had lasted for centuries was gone. The aftermath. As they drifted into the void of space, silence filled the shuttle. No one spoke. No one had to. They had survived. They had done what no one else had, escaped Omega-12. But the cost had been high. Elias leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. The nightmare was over. At least, that's what he told himself. Because deep down, he knew the truth. Some things don't die that easily. And somewhere, buried in the wreckage of Omega-12, something was still waiting. Watching. And learning. The shuttle drifted through the wreckage of Omega-12, its engines sputtering but holding together. The team sat in silence, exhaustion weighing on them like a crushing force. Elias Carter stared out the viewport at the debris field. The station, their nightmare, was gone. Nothing remained but shattered metal and a swirling storm of energy where the core had once pulsed with unimaginable power. Kane was gone. And so was the entity. At least, that's what they hoped. Haunted by the past. Dr. Rice broke the silence. We should send a distress signal. Someone needs to know what happened here. Vance, still at the controls, nodded. Already sending. But we're pretty far out. Might take a while before anyone picks it up. Vega leaned back, running a hand through his sweat-matted hair. Not like anyone's gonna believe us. He let out a dry chuckle. A prison filled with ancient nightmares. A creature that thought it was a god. Sounds like a bad horror story. Elias didn't laugh. His grip on the armrest tightened. Because he knew. This wasn't over. Omega-12 was destroyed. But something still felt wrong. Like the whispers had never truly left. Like something was watching. And then, the lights flickered. A presence in the dark. Rice sat up. What was that? Vance checked the console. Power surge. Must be damage from the escape. The lights flickered again. Then, a whisper. It was faint, almost too faint to hear. But Elias heard it. We are not gone. A chill crawled up his spine. Vega stiffened. Tell me you heard that. Rice swallowed hard. I did. Vance cursed under his breath. No, no way. The station's gone. There's no way. The whisper grew stronger. We are eternal. The temperature dropped. Their breaths came out in cold mist. Then, the ship's systems went dead. The fight isn't over. Alarms blared. The shuttle shuddered violently, as if something unseen had grabbed hold of it. Elias jumped to his feet. Status. Vance frantically worked the controls. I don't know. Something's interfering with the ship. The whisper became a roar. You thought you could escape. We are beyond time. Beyond death. And now, you belong to us. Then, something slammed into the hull. The metal groaned. The ship lurched. And outside the viewport, a shape moved in the darkness. The final choice. Elias grabbed his rifle. He didn't know if bullets would help, but he wasn't going down without a fight. Reyes frantically searched the ship's data logs. There has to be a way to cut whatever is interfering. Vega pulled out a detonator. If it's still here, we blow it to hell. Vance gritted his teeth. And what if that kills us too? The whisper became laughter. Elias took a deep breath. His mind raced. They had fought through hell to escape Omega-12. They had survived. And now, this thing wanted to take them back. No, not happening. We do what we always do, Elias growled, stepping toward the controls. We fight. A final stand, or a new nightmare. As the ship trembled and the whispers grew louder, the team prepared for their final battle. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about ending the nightmare, for good. But deep down, one thought haunted them all. Had they truly escaped Omega-12? Or had Omega-12 escaped with them?